The Greek naval force contingents were the Athenians, who owned the most triremes, the Corinthians, the Megarians, the Aeginetans, the Sicyonians, the Lacedaemonians, the Epidaurians, the Eretrians, and the Trezenians. The Greek fleet departed from Artemision and assembled in Salamis, as the Athenians had requested, for they wanted their families to evacuate Attica. Thus, while everyone else anchored in Salamis, the Athenians returned home and ordered the people to abandon their homeland. The women, the children, and the elderly were taken with ships. Some of them were moved to Trezena, others to Aegina and Salamis. The priests of Athena, some poor people, and some others stayed behind, as they believed that the wooden wall of the prophecy was the stockade they had built around Acropolis. But the wooden fence was not enough to keep enemies at bay. Acropolis fell, the temples were set alight, and the Persian left nothing but debris and burnt land in every part of Attica he set his foot on. When the generals were informed about the events in Athens, they no longer wished to stay in Salamis. They went aboard and were ready to sail away. At that moment, Themistocles reached out to the Spartan admiral Eurybiades and convinced him to hold a war council. There, the Athenian general started to argue in order to convince the Greeks not to leave Salamis. The Corinthians were listening, furious, and one of them told Themistocles that someone who no longer has a homeland has no right to speak. Themistocles replied that the ships were his homeland. Afterwards, he turned to Euripides and threatened to leave along with his 200 ships if the Greeks chose to depart from Salamis. He would gather all the people, women and children, and they would search for a new motherland in Italy. Euripides feared that he would lose the Athenian ships, and thus decided that the fleet should remain in Salamis. That very same morning, Xerxes the Great went to inspect his fleet, which was anchored in Phaleron. There he called the officers and the commanders of the ships and ordered his general Mardonius to ask each one of them about the naval battle. Everyone agreed that they should confront the Greek fleet in Salamis, and only Artemisia, the queen of Halicarnassus, voiced an opposing view. Xerxes, after hearing everyone, decided to follow the majority. He ordered the fleet to sail away to Salamis and the army to move towards the Peloponnese. The light was fading when, late in the afternoon, the Persian fleet reached Salamis, and it was not the time to start a battle. Meanwhile, news of the Persian army's departure reached the Greek camp, and the Peloponnesians became agitated. They called for another council, where they stood by their opinion, arguing it was foolish and unwise to stay and fight in a country that had already fallen into the hands of the enemy. Fearing the disbanding of the fleet, Themistocles secretly left the meeting, found Sicinus, his loyal slave, and sent him to the Persian camp. Sicinus, following his master's orders, presented himself to the Persian generals and, speaking in their native language, forwarded Themistocles' message. "My master, who speaks highly of Xerxes the Great, ordered me to report that the Greeks are cowering and planning to run. If you try to stop them, a great victory awaits you." The Persians believed him and started to move their fleet in the middle of the night in order to block the Greeks at the straits. Meanwhile, the generals of the Greek camp continued to fight and disagree, as they knew nothing of the Persian fleet's moves. Then a ship arrived from Aegina carrying Aristides, the son of Lysimachus, an Athenian exile. He reported that the Persian fleet had surrounded them and shut them in at the straits. The generals did not believe him, but then another ship, which had deserted from the Persian fleet over the commands of General Panetius from Tinos, came in. The generals, after finding out from Panetius the Persians' plans, were finally convinced and prepared for battle. At the break of dawn, the Greek ships, ignoring the safety provided by their anchoring, sailed with order and discipline against the enemy. On their array at the right wing, the most honorary position was held by the 16 Spartan triremes. Beside them, fully experienced at sea, and along with 30 triremes lined up with the Aeginetans, and opposite they faced the mighty Ionian fleet. At the left wing, the Athenians lined up with 180 ships ready to confront the Phoenicians, who were daring men and battle-hardened soldiers. The moment the two fleets were about to clash, the Greek ships retreated calmly and in an orderly way, ensuring their bows remained facing the enemy. They did not retreat out of fear, but to avoid meeting the Persian fleet at the center of the straits, since it was an open space and the rival ships could maneuver more easily. Instead, they tried to lure them to a narrower point, where the bulky and heavy Persian ships could not move as quickly. Themistocles, who had ordered the retreat, had one more reason to delay the battle. He waited any minute for the gentle breeze that usually wafted in the mornings at the straits to come. The waves would not affect the low Greek ships, but they would definitely make the elevated Phoenician triremes struggle. The ship's toss would prevent the Persian archers from finding their target, while making the vessels list to the side, exposed to the rams of the Greek ships. The Greek ships were so close to the shore, almost touching solid ground, when an Athenian ship under the commander Amenius from Pallene leaped forward and rammed a Phoenician ship. Meanwhile, at the right end of the array, the Aeginetans attacked the Ionian ships and the naval battle sprawled. Because of the narrow space, the Persians were not able to muster up front with more ships than the Greeks, who therefore faced their rivals with a fleet almost equal in number. Considering that the two rivals now fought with even capability, the outcome of the battle depended on the bravery of the crew and their skills to execute with accuracy the maneuvers ordered by the captains. At the same time, Xerxes, seated on a throne set up on Mount Gallio, was watching the naval battle in agony, surrounded by his guards and officers. Every time he saw a ship of his own clash with a Greek one, he asked for the general's name and ordered his recorders to note it down, in order to reward him if he managed to ram it or punish him if he was seen losing courage. For this reason, Persians and their allies fought with courage, for they sensed their king's eyes on them. At the beginning, the battle was tight, and the Persians could hold their ground. Indeed, at the right end, where the Ionian navy was, the Spartans and Aeginetans struggled, because the Ionians were equally skillful seamen, but they still had grit and held. At the left end, the Athenians, with their 180 ships, pushed hard on the Phoenicians. The Athenian triremes approached the Phoenicians, and as they moved quickly past them, broke their oars, thus immobilizing them and turning to them swiftly to hit them with the rams. Soon, the Phoenician array broke, and the ships fled, causing mayhem among the fleet by crashing onto the second front ships on their way out. While confusion reigned among the Persian fleet, an Athenian trireme targeted the ship of Queen Artemisia. As she tried to escape, she hit on a Persian ship and, without hesitation, rammed and sank it. Witnessing this, the Athenian leader of the triremes thought that Artemisia was on the Greek side, so he stopped the pursuit. Watching on the other side, Xerxes thought Artemisia had rammed a rival ship and commented with disappointment, "Today my men have turned into women, and my women into men." The Persians did not last long and soon retreated in panic, trying to escape from the strait, while the Athenians pursued them and sank their ships. Those that managed to escape encountered the Aeginetans, who waited at the exit of the straits. Meanwhile, the guard established on the island of Psyttalia was exterminated by Athenian soldiers, who were led there by Aristides. The nearly 800 Persian ships that managed to escape retreated to Phaleron to be under the protection of the army. At the end of the day, the sea was full of shipwrecks. The westerly pushed them to a beach in Attica called Kalliadis. And then everyone remembered an old prophecy saying, "The women of Kalliadis shall cook their food on a fire of oars." The Greeks, in high spirits, dragged to Salamis any broken ship that could still float and prepared to confront the Persians again. On the contrary, the Persians, under the weight of defeat, preferred to leave as soon as possible because Themistocles sent his loyal slave Sicinus to warn them to hurry, since the Greeks supposedly planned to destroy the bridge of Hellespont. And so Xerxes departed from Greece, leaving General Mardonius behind to winter in Thessaly and strike the Peloponnese the forthcoming spring.
"2,500 years have passed since that day. The world has changed. Humanity has changed too. What remains the same, though, is that people will always fight for freedom, with courage and virtue.